What is inflation? Everybody's talking about inflation is on the rise. It's increased more than it has done in how many years? But what is it? Do you want to know? So, my name's Amanda Walker. I'm the mortgage coach, and I believe that everyone has a right to own their own home. Now, how does inflation fit in with house prices? I'm glad you asked. Right, basically, I want to start back from the beginning. What is inflation? Now, inflation is the increase of prices over a certain period of time. Normally, they check it year on year. So, for example, you've got a bag of groceries. It cost £50 last year. If inflation has gone up by 10%, that is £55 for the exact same groceries as it was before. Now, if it was only a small thing like groceries, it probably wouldn't be a problem because it's only a fiver. But if you put that into perspective of all goods and services, if you look at petrol that has gone up by a lot more than that, if you look at utilities, electricity, gas that has gone up by even more than that, you see where the problem lies. So just to sum up, inflation is the increase of costs over time. So it's the price of an item. You compare what it was last year or 2 years ago, 3 years ago, you get the gist, to what it is now. And if there's been an increase, then that's inflation. That's inflation. Now, how does that happen? Why is there inflation? Right, there are several different types of inflation. Now, one of them is called demand inflation, and that is when demand outstrips supply. Now, what I mean by that is, have you ever gone to view a property and there are 20 other people there as well? That's what I mean by demand. Demand is so high compared to supply. Now, you see everywhere that people are building properties, right? That you see tower blocks everywhere, there's building sites everywhere, but everybody wants to live in the same place and there is only so much room. So once you find a location you love, you can guarantee there'll be another 20 people that also are looking for that property. And that is what demand is. Now, it wouldn't matter as much as if you really want to live in that property. What boosts the demand is income. Now, a lot of people's income have gone up. There's a lot more money out there and there's a higher disposable income. Now, disposable income is what it means. It's disposable. So you've got your net salary, and then after that, and obviously you've got your gross salary first, take off tax, national insurance, any pension contributions, gives you your net salary. Your net salary then, after you've taken off your Netflix, your phone, your petrol, your rent and everything else, whatever's left is higher than it was last year or the year before. Plus, if you're on lockdown and not really doing very much, then you've probably saved up a lot of money as well. Plus, if you were living like with your parents the whole time, you've probably made a decision that it's time to get some independence and move out and spread your wings. So all of those are pushing people to look for properties now. And the fact that there just aren't enough properties out there means that if you go and the market value of the property, the purchase price is 250, and someone else is like, yeah, I'm going to pay 250, and then the next person's like, well, I'm going to pay 255, and the next person's like, I can do 260, and the other one's like 275, and you're like, I can't go up that high. This is what is happening. This is what is happening. And that means that the person was only needed to sell it for 250, but is getting 275 for it, you know? So that is what inflation is doing. That is what demand inflation is. When there is so much demand and not enough supply. Now, the other reason why this is also happening, and this is also under demand inflation, is the interest rates. I mean, 18 months ago, I could do a mortgage for less than 1%. So of course a lot of people are going to borrow. Of course a lot of people are going to be like, well, I was going to borrow, 200,000 and put down 50k deposit, but if it's less than 1%, why don't I borrow 250,000? you get the gist, right? A lot of people, they'll put in the 5% deposit, they'll borrow the 95% from the bank because the interest rates are so low. It's so attractive. They're like, let's go for it, right? The next thing, type of inflation I would like to call is cost push inflation. It's when the cost pushes up the price. Simple, right? I'll give you an example. So say you're making widgets, right? You're in a factory, you've got all these components, you're making a widget. By the way, if you don't know what a widget is, it's just a little item. It could be anything. It's just to explain the example. And yeah, so basically you've got all the components in the factory, beavering away, making this widget. The costs, the raw materials of this widget is say £4. The labour to actually make it is say £1, because it only, takes less than a couple of minutes to make it. That's why it's only £1. So that means the cost per unit, per individual widget is £5. And you think to yourself, how much would people pay for a widget like this? Well, I want to make £5 profit. I'm going to sell it for £10. And off you go, and you're selling them and everything's great. And then you go to get the raw materials for the next batch of widgets, and the raw materials have gone up. You go to your normal suppliers, they're not available anymore. You've got to go to abroad, or you have to supply them locally, but it costs you more. You have to get the delivery truck to get there, and the person in the delivery driver wants to actually get paid more now than they used to. So you have to fork out for the delivery driver labour, the increase in labour. And then the petrol to put in the car is nearly doubled. You have to fork out for that as well. So this poor little widget that used to cost £5 now costs £7.50, but you still want your £5, so you're going to charge £12.50. So that is cost push inflation. And then the last thing is the government. They have decided that there isn't enough money in the economy, and they want to help. They want to help stimulate the economy. So they go out and they print loads of notes, circulate them into the economy, and hope it helps stimulate the economy. The next thing is, if the government thinks printing isn't the best idea, because if you flood the economy with too many additional notes, then it devalues it, and obviously it affects the exchange rate as well, then they decide that they're just going to get some government debt. So they're just going to borrow the money and again bring it out into the economy, and they can do that with government bonds and things like that. And if you want to know more about that, please put it in the comment and I'll do a specific video for that. And they also lend more money to the banks, because the bank doesn't actually create money, it has to borrow. So the way a bank functions, and I can go into this in a bit more detail if you want another video on it, but a bank is a business. It needs money coming in order to borrow, in order to lend money coming out. Now, the money coming in is normally savings, but if people aren't saving enough and there's not enough money in the bank, then they can't lend any more money out. So they then go to the Bank of England and the government and try and borrow money, but they have to put some kind of security. Just like with your mortgage, you'd have to use your property as the security. With them, they have to also use some kind of security. Now, what the government sometimes do is they say, okay, that based on that level of security, I'll give you £500,000. But what they were doing is they were like, based on that level of security, I'll give you £650,000. So an extra £150,000. They were actually allowing them to borrow more on the current asset in order to, again, stimulate the economy. So why is this a problem? Why is inflation a problem? Right, the issue is you've got income, you've got the cost of goods and services, and you've got house prices as 3 examples. And they do not go in the same level of inflation. If they all went up by 10%, it'd be very, very weird, but they would all be on par. It's all relative, isn't it? But if your salary increases by, say, 10%, but house prices increase by 100%, you can't afford it, right? If goods and services increase by 50%, again, you can't afford it. So that is what the issue is. So, or the other way round, your salary goes up by, you know, say, I mean, it happened to me when I graduated from uni. I went from working at a supermarket to being a trainee accountant. My salary doubled, you know, and that was how I was able to buy my first property, because properties didn't increase that significantly. So I'd gone from earning what I was earning to earning double, and of course I could afford my flat. But I was lucky that there weren't that many of us looking for flats back then, because if we'd all left university, all doubled our salaries, were all looking for flats, then the same thing would have happened with the demand and supply. We'd have all been looking at that flat, and it would have no longer been an affordable price for me. It would have been pushed up in price because I'd been competing with others. So that is what I'm saying. There are several different areas, and because they're all moving at different levels, that is what causes inflation. So just to recap, inflation is the price of items going up over time. Now, if you've got any questions, please feel free to put a comment in the chat. If you've enjoyed it, do a like. Do that bell so you know when I'm doing my next video, subscribe, and I just want to thank everyone so far for your support. It's been great. And if there's any topics, I mean, people are asking me all the time to talk about different topics, which is great, but if you think of anything and you'd like me to talk about it around obviously money matters and mortgages, and you know, obviously inflation covers that as well, please feel free to send me a comment, and yeah, it'll be great to get in touch. Take care, and thanks for your time.